Behind every payslip, there's a hidden story because money isn't just numbers. It can be rent, it can be childcare, security, and stress. And when employees don't know how to manage it correctly, that ripple effect can hit every corner of your business. Payroll gets people paid, HR keeps them supported. But what happens when that person's money hits their bank account and they don't know how to manage it correctly? That's where today's guest comes in. Andy Lang is the founder of a company called Munny, a financial wellbeing platform on a mission to make money less complicated, less stressful, and a lot more human. Andy's built Munny to tackle one of the most overlooked challenges in business today, helping employees not just earn their money, but manage it and help them improve their lives, their confidence, and their financial futures. And today we're digging into why financial education in the workplace matters more than ever, what challenges employees are facing with their money right now, and why money is still one of the biggest taboo subjects in the workplace, how to break that silence down. And Andy's going to leave us with a small step change that anyone can make today to improve their financial well-being. Andy, welcome to The Secret Sauce. It's brilliant to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Hope you're well.
Awesome. Let's dive straight into it. So I know we've spoken before about how payroll and financial well-being connects, but today's the first time we're going to get a solid chance to dig deeper into your story and how money's changing the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, from our perspective, when we launched the business, it was all about employee well-being and making sure that employees were looked after by their employers. And ultimately, we bridged the gap left by the education system. A lot of what we talk about and teach should be delivered centrally in the education system. But let's not go into that just yet, because that's a whole other realm that we'll enter.
Okay. So let's start with big picture. Financial education in the workplace has been called absolutely everything from a perk to a lifeline. Mm-hmm. So why is it so important, and why should employers treat it more than just a nice to have?
There's a load of things that go into it in terms of the stats, in terms of the human element, in terms of, morale within the workplace, stress levels within the workplace. There's been loads of studies that have been done. Ultimately, what we find is that money tends to be, there's that whole saying, root of all evil, but it does tend to be the number one thing that people worry or stress about. And if you're sat there in a work environment, whether that is in an office, at a desk like I was used to do, or, maybe you're a footballer on the playing field, whatever it might be, anywhere in between that, having money worries starts to distract you from delivering and performing in a workplace. So actually, there are some quite big commercial reasons as to why a workplace should worry about it and should want to do something about it. PwC did a study that showed this in 2023, and that showed that employees who are financially stressed are 5 times more likely to be distracted. So if you're distracted and your role requires you to have maybe a sharp eye for detail potentially, or you've got to perform in public, those distractions will mean that your performance drops dramatically. And then they're twice as more likely to be actively looking for another job. Whether that is to seek a transfer using that football analogy, or whether that's because you're just sitting there and actually your financial problems that you have, you're blaming those on your employer, which does tend to happen because that's where your money comes from. So you look at the source of your money and you'll lay the blame at their feet. So there are lots and lots and lots of reasons why a business, an organization, would want its employees or its people to be looked after financially.
Right, exactly. When employees feel financially secure, everything else sort of follows, like you were saying, the productivity, the well-being, the retention, and that culture within an organization sort of lives and breathes, people's, well-being, so that takes us straight into Money's story, really. For anybody who hasn't come across Money yet, what is it? How does it help organizations support their people when it comes to money?
So we're an independent financial education business. That's the best way to describe it in an elevator pitch style. As little words as I possibly can use. So we go into businesses and we deliver financial education programs. That might range from digital tools, which we'll come on to, or human interventions. And we're delivering on-site workshops or on-site one-to-one coaching sessions. So it's probably easier to give you some examples of how we work and who we work with. So an example would be Serco, the government contractor. We go into where they have large numbers of staff. We deliver on-site one-to-one sessions and on-site workshops, paid for by Serco, but staff can come in and talk about whatever they want financially. The trends, we do see trends. I know we're going to come on to that later on in terms of what are the key topics we tend to see. Pensions is probably the number one topic of conversation. Lots of people that we encounter and talk to have pension anxiety and just don't feel like they're ready for retirement. And ultimately, a lot of them aren't ready for retirement and do have to do something different to make themselves more prepared. But that's how it works. We have what we would class as our skills products. So we have workshops, webinars, and one-to-one coaching. And then we have
Right.
our digital tools. We've got an app that's on iOS and Android, and we've got M, which is our virtual money coach, which is AI powered. So we deliver those tools into a workplace. They can pick and choose what they want, as much of this and little of that as they like, and then we roll it out across their workforce.
That's powerful. So it's not just about the tools, it's about trust. So let me ask you, what exactly are employees struggling with at the moment? I know we sort of briefly touched on it, but where are you seeing the biggest? Is it all pensions? Is it tax? What are they struggling with most right now?
So to be honest, the biggest thing is people's budgets being absolutely crunched. I think everyone's feeling it. The cost of living, which we hear about that cost of living crisis all the time, that sort of buzz phrase. But ultimately, if you look at what things cost now and what they did a year ago, it's dramatically different for everybody. I feel it. I went to the shop earlier on, and my meal deal that used to be £3.20 is now £4.50. So I feel it on a daily basis. Coffee is average now £4.70 for a coffee. So your day-to-day expenditure items are just getting more and more expensive, and people are getting more and more disillusioned by the cost of living. It's simple as that. So that's one area. The second area is definitely debt. People have taken on credit cards, have taken on loans. They've maybe tried to fix it themselves by getting a bigger loan to pay off the smaller stuff, but then they've reused the older stuff, and they've ended up then almost double dipping into their debt, which means that they've now got credit cards and a loan. So lots of people then sit and just put their head in the sand and try and figure out how to get out of that situation. There's stats out there that show that 9 million people have got what they would class as serious debt, and only 1/3 of them are seeking help. And that's usually attached to a bit of embarrassment, be feeling a bit ashamed, feeling scared, and not trusting the financial sector that we have. And then secondly, not knowing where to go. So we deliver sessions that cover off the 10 debt solutions that are in the UK, and where to go, how to get help, because there's loads of ways to deal with it, but people just don't know that they are out there, those solutions. And then I'd say pensions is probably the number one topic. We see key themes, people not knowing how much they need. So we talk about the big number and helping people work out what the big number should be. But also we see people that have got 4 or 5 old workplace pensions just floating around, and they fall into this £19 billion of lost pensions that the UK currently has. So, we do see pensions being quite a big topic of conversation, particularly when you get past a certain age, like I got past a few years ago, and you suddenly start to realise life's too short. We need to figure out where our pensions are going. So
Yeah. Brilliant. So when you look at the workplace today, what are the biggest challenges that employees are facing when they manage their money? Where do you see the biggest opportunity for employers to step in, add value, and sort of make that difference to their employees?
Well, there's quite a few good schemes that we've come across. Employee save schemes, share schemes, and lots of things where you can automate savings straight from your salary straight into a savings account. So you're treating it as a bill. So you're starting to build financial resilience. One of the things that I guess the UK suffers from is a lack of financial resilience. I think Legal and General study, Deadline to Breadline, showed that the average UK adult has got less than 19 days worth of savings. So if they lost a job today, by day 20, the savings pot's left at zero. So one of the big focuses is definitely building our financial resilience and having 2 or 3 months worth of buffer. So there's definitely areas where employers can help with that by automating and by putting things in place. There's a few firms that we're talking to as well where they allow payroll to be split, and you get some midway through the month, some at the end of the month. That just removes that whole 4-week wait, and we do see lots of people at the end of the month really struggling and scraping and trying to make ends meet. So that might help, having a slightly more staged approach to pay. I think the challenge for employers, because that's another area we consider, is that since COVID, lots of people now work hybrid, work remote, scattered across not just the town that they're in, but scattered across Europe, scattered across even far-flung places. So I think for some employers, actually delivering some of these benefits, some of these perks, as we described them, it is tough, because how do you logistically deliver that when people are spread all around the country or all around the world ultimately?
Spot on. I think, because money stress doesn't stay at home all the while. It shows up at work, in focus, performance, mental health. But part of the problem is people just don't talk about it enough, I don't think. I think we've got to look at, I won't say people being more open, but it's about guiding those people to guys like yourselves and Munny, to make that change and seek help where they can find it from. Money runs through every organization like electricity through a grid. And it's one of the subjects people are still far too afraid to talk about. And when silence wins, stress grows, businesses pay the price, and money's still one of the last workplace taboos that people still hide behind. HR teams are like, don't discuss salary, don't discuss money. You shouldn't be discussing that. Why do you think people struggle to talk about money, especially at work? And how do you see that we can break the silence on that?
It's a really tough one, and we see it. And I would say that certain generations are getting better at it. The younger generations are a little bit more open. They're a bit better at communication, particularly than the older generations. If I compare them to, say, my parents, for example, money is just off the table. It's never discussed at any point. How much was the meal that we just went for last night? It's not for discussion. Yeah. So it is interesting how different generations have got a different approach to communication, particularly about things like money. Again, another stat that's been released is that 81% of people that are employed will not talk to their employer about money. So 4 out of 5, it's just not a topic of conversation they're willing to have. And I think a big part of it just comes down to trust. I think there's been so many scandals, there's been so many sort of problems. I think the latest one that you're going to see in the press is about the PCT and the car finance stuff. And there's just so many sort of, scandals that come out, and they're big news items, big headline items. And people's trust just drops massively. The confidence in the system just drops massively. And then all the horror stories tend to be the things that you see in the press. And just last week, I don't know if you caught it, but the documentary about the football financial shame, the V11 as they're labelled. We're actually working with the V11 at the moment to try and help them put together an education program. But what we saw there was people in positions of extreme wealth and extreme income coming in being completely abused by individuals and by a business and by a structure. So, there's so little trust in the system that it has to be built up, I think, over time. And it has to be built up through independent education. And that's one of the things I mentioned it right at the outset, that we are an independent business. So we don't sell products. We don't get attached to products. We don't get commission from anywhere. Our focus is on leaving people feeling better, more confident, more knowledgeable about what they should and shouldn't be doing with their finances. So there's no ulterior motive. There's no angle in the work that we do.
Right. Okay. And that's, for me, that's where culture meets education, which brings us perfectly onto the practical side of things. Let's make it real for everyone listening. We measure salaries to the penny, we track payroll down to the decimal, but financial well-being, that's really, for me, that's harder to measure, and yet it defines how people show up at work and in their home life. What's one small change that we could make today to improve financial well-being for people?
Oh, it's a great question, Ian. There's probably got 20 at the top of my mind. But the one thing that we repeat probably more often than not, there's one thing that we talk about, and it's know your numbers. So KYN, as we refer to it as, if you just know your numbers, and that's across the board. So your income, your outgoings, what's left, how much your pension pot is, how much you owe on your car finance, when your car tax is due. Just knowing your numbers relieves so much stress and gives you so much more peace of mind. I actually was looking back at a podcast I was on previously where I talked about my own knowing my numbers and doing it myself, practicing what I preach. Yeah. And I spent the afternoon sorting out my pension pots and figuring out where my money was going, how much I had. The next day, the relief that I felt, the sense of it was sort of a weight off my shoulders that I understood now where my pension was heading, what I had to do to change it and to achieve what I wanted to achieve. Yeah. And knowing that kind of stuff just makes a massive difference. Going back to your question about financial well-being and how do we measure it, there's lots of different ways. We've got our own financial health check. Every bank has got a version of an online financial health check. It's difficult because subjective. People look at things in different ways. Ultimately, it's about your peace of mind. How do you feel when you go to pay for something? Are you paying for it, panicking it might not go through, or do you know what's in there and know how much you can afford to spend? And it's that knowledge that we talk about quite a lot.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. That makes financial well-being actionable. It's not just abstract. So let's wrap this up. This is one of my favorite parts of the show now, and it's probably where I get a little bit too much joy and excitement from, I suppose. So it's the quick fire round from the secret sauce. So it's no overthinking, right?
Okay.
Big thoughts on it. This is the first thing that comes to people's mind is usually the gut response and the right response. So what's one mistake people are making too often with their money?
Comparisons, 100%. Like Social pressure is huge. By the way, is it one word answers or can I carry on
No,
talking?
you can go for it.
I just wanted to check.
Exactly
But
what's in your answer.
yeah, comparison by a country mile. And this affects everybody from the age of, I would say, 7 upwards. You know, the minute you have something, so let's talk about cars. Okay, so you probably have a car, I have a car. You pull up at the light, someone next to you's got a bigger and better car. You instantly start to compare. And that social pressure and that keeping up with the Joneses, that is the number one thing that I come across in the work that we do. Comparison is a thief of joy is one of the things that we talk about. And it's so, so true. It's really, really important to just not compare yourself to others. Whether it's something small, like what shoes they've got on, or whether it's the holiday they've been on and you've not been on, all of those comparisons just create a lack of financial stability inside.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Right. Next one. What's the most underrated habit in financial well-being?
The 24-hour rule. There's one for you. So, yeah. So when you're making a purchase, and this is for like non-essential, maybe luxury items, but just non-essential, I think is a better description. So I'll use my Amazon account as non-essential because everything I buy on there is very unessential stuff. It's just stuff that I think would be cool. And I'm sure you're the same based on that facial expression. So the 24-hour rule is about when you're adding things to your basket, go and sleep on it. Wake up the next day, revisit the basket. It'll still be sat there. It won't have gone anywhere. And what you'll probably find, and our studies have shown that 6 times out of 10, so 60% of the time, you'll go, actually, I don't need that. And you just delete it. And that delay removes impulse. It removes emotion. It removes the whole buying for buying's sake. So yeah, 24-hour rule is massive. If you're looking at an item, in person's more difficult because you might have took a trip to the shops. You might have specifically gone out there for a day out. But when it's online, it's easy. Just save it to your basket, go back to it the next morning and have a look.
Brilliant. I think that's one I'll pass straight on to the wife as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Best financial advice you've ever been given? And if you want to name the person who gave it, that's brilliant as well.
I would say, I can't remember who told me this, but it's something that you'll hear quite a lot is pay yourself first. And I guess our version of that is what I mentioned a minute ago, which is treat your savings payment like it's a bill. So lots of people will sit down and go, right, I've got my mortgage, I've got my council tax, my gas, my water, electric, etc. And they'll build their income and outgoings list. But what they never, ever put on their outgoings list is savings. And then what they do is they'll move on to what's left and they'll try and save at the end of the month out of what's left. The most important thing, I think, is just to add savings into that list of direct debits and just add it as a bill, whether it's £20, £50, £100, whatever you can afford to save, automate it and just create it as if it's a bill. And your future self will thank you. So that's the one thing that I would say is the best.
That's pretty epic, to be fair. I like that. I like that a lot. So if you had to boil your secret sauce down for financial well-being to 3 ingredients, what would they be?
Oh, 3 ingredients. Well, know your numbers is definitely one. So that's a biggie because that gives you that sort of peace of mind. I think then I would say the comparison side of things. So spend money on things that make you happy. Now that might be experiences rather than things. I think that's a really important thing to differentiate from as well. Yeah. So know your numbers, spend money on things that make you happy, and do have a plan. Do have a vision for the future. I think lots of people have sort of sleptwalked into a retirement era. We're seeing stats where people are going back into work in their 70s because they haven't got the funds to actually stay retired. So I definitely think having a plan is important, and not a dream, but an actual plan with numbers and dates and deadlines. So know your numbers, don't compare, have a plan. That's what I would say.
I'll take them 3. They're good 3. Right. One thing every employer should understand about money and mental health that we can literally pass out to the people listening. So the C-suite guys, the HR, the payroll professionals across the country, across the globe in some places. What's one thing that they need to understand about money and mental health?
Oh, that's a great question. The one thing they need to understand, I think just the direct impact it can have on individuals when they are struggling to make ends meet. You know, a lot of the one-to-ones that we deliver, and they'll be like this scenario where we're sat on a virtual call, the levels of stress and the levels of anxiety and the levels of instability that not having enough money can create, or perceived not enough money, because sometimes they have enough, they're just not managing it effectively. But the levels of anxiety and stress and everything, it just causes utter chaos internally. So I think maybe you might see someone who looks on the face of it like they're doing really well, there's sort of a Starbucks coffee and putting that on Instagram or whatever it is, but deep down, they might be deeply anxious about their finances. So I think that the sort of pure connection between the two is absolutely vital. We do a lot of work with mental health organisations. We work with Health Assured, who are UK's largest EAP provider. And what we find is the work that they do actually overlaps massively with the work that we do, because most people they speak to, somewhere deep down in their stress and their list of things that are problematic, is their finances. It's sat in there as one of the key factors.
Right, I love it. I mean, that's exactly why we do this round. It gives us great insight, instinct, and a little bit of personality along the way. So, Andy, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. You've shown us why financial education is business essential, not just business benefit, and how money can help employers tackle one of the biggest challenges in employees' work life. One of the last traditions we hold on the Secret Sauce is that every guest gets to nominate a payroll Olympian, but in your case, a financial well-being Olympian. So who do you believe is raising the bar in the industry? Who's your pick, Andy?
Oh, that's a great question. I think because of how relevant it is right now, I'm going to go down the sporting route. We do a lot of work within sport, working with the Premier League and the PFA, but I'm going to choose Brian Robson, as in Robbo, England legend, Man United legend. We work with Brian. Brian's an ambassador of Munny, and he has a business called HPI, High Performance Individuals, and they're trying to work with young footballers, and we do that work with them. We support them in that to prevent the problems that you see in the press every day of the week. I think it was just last week, John Barnes was declared bankrupt, and a few weeks before, Rod Wallace was declared bankrupt, and some of these situations that the V11 documentary is sort of highlighted. So I would say Captain Marvel himself, Mr. Robbo, would be my financial well-being.
That's a legendary choice, mate. That is absolutely legendary. You know what? I would love to get him onto the Secret Sauce to get his insight. I can't promise that I'm going to be able to get him, but I'll try my very best to get him on the Secret Sauce. For everyone listening, you can connect with Andy directly on his LinkedIn, which we'll post in the show notes. There'll be links to Munny on there as well, so everybody can have a look around the financial solutions that they have to offer. Andy, thank you again. And to everybody tuned in this episode, if it has hit home for you, I want you to subscribe to the Secret Sauce and share it with somebody within your organization that needs to hear the message. The podcast is important. It gives you real world solutions to some of the stuff that sits behind the eyes. You know what I mean? The Secret Sauce is there on LinkedIn. It'll be produced. So it'll come, this episode will come out in a couple of weeks' time. But until next time, keep raising the bar, keep building what matters. And remember, payroll and HR and financial well-being aren't just about running numbers. They're running systems, they're touching lives, and they're running the business and protecting futures. I've been Ian O'Callaghan, and this has been The Secret Sauce.